What's up, everybody? Welcome back. We're here with some more NFL DFS picks and lineup advice for DraftKings and FanDuel. This time for the divisional round of the NFL playoffs, Saturday and Sunday, all four games. Welcome, I'm Brian Jester, co-founder here at Occupy Fantasy, single game $1 million winner. And I'm joined by Jack, architect of our lineup builder. And Jack, these weekends hold a special place in your heart because it was one of your biggest GPP wins over these multi-day slates.
Yep, Divisional was the first one ever that got me to spend all my time on this. Yeah, here we are. These are always bittersweet, man. Like I feel like we're in the rhythm of these videos, but now I'm like, we only really get like one more after this, and then it's over. So just gotta enjoy it today.
That's exactly right. So what we're going to do in this video, it's difficult for us as content providers because DraftKings has decided to make their main slate the four-gamer, all four games for both days, and there's massively different strategy, especially when we have such a large late swap window after tonight's game. And then FanDuel decided to separate them out into two-gamers. So we're going to go team by team, injury notes, usage notes, to kind of give you some insight into each of the 8 teams on the slate. Then we'll talk about the DraftKings 4-gamer. Then we'll talk about each of the FanDuel 2-gamers, the specific strategies needed for both of those and all three of those slates. And at the end, we'll hit on maybe a couple showdown notes for all four of the games. And this is a pre-recorded video, so if you have questions, drop them in the comments and we will answer them throughout the weekend. So Jack, let's start. Before we get into it, though, I have to give a shout out to one of our longtime viewers, Michael, who actually took down 100K on the 6-gamer last week. Said our De'Ami Brown call on last week's video was integral in him winning the 100K. So, Michael, shout out to you. And Jack, for those who say we never give any picks, De'Ami Brown was a pick that won somebody 100K.
Yeah, and although this player wasn't a member, he did show up in the solo, non-duplicated FanDuel optimal. And Brian, literally the exact kind of lineup we talk about is a 4x2 game stack, one low owned play. It was just, and it was the expensive running backs from the other games, which we talked about. Like when you're going to build a game stack, you want the. So, I mean, I think all around we saw that these strategies do work. Obviously, in high risk, right? We're going to go through the stretches of not winning, but it's great to see it.
Yeah, let's see if we can run it back here this week. Hopefully, one of you out there watching can be the next big winner. So let's start with the first game. Quick rundown of the schedule: 4:30 on Saturday, 4:30 Eastern, Houston, Kansas City. 8 o'clock Saturday is Washington, Detroit. On Sunday, we have the afternoon game at 3 o'clock, Rams and Philly, and then at 6:30 p.m. Eastern, Baltimore and Buffalo, the game everyone has been waiting for. So let's start with the first game of the weekend, Houston and Kansas City. Both Joe Mixon and their linebacker Azeez Al-Shaair are questionable. Both are expected to play. Houston's wide receiver Robert Woods has not practiced all week. He's officially questionable, but Jack, they elevated running back J.J. Taylor from the practice squad, and I think the first initial reaction for most people might be, oh shit, Joe Mixon might not play as a running back. But one of their longtime reporters said it's for returner insurance reasons, which is what Robert Woods does. So it sounds like Robert Woods will be out. Now you add in the fact that they've also released Deontay Johnson. Now, if you look back last week, a pretty chaotic wide receiver room has now condensed to just Nico Collins, John Mechie, and Xavier Hutchinson.
Yeah, that's refreshing after, we had to try to decipher the coach speak last week with Deontay Johnson getting fed the ball. Well, obviously that didn't happen. But yeah, I think and he's an underperformer, right?
John
Mechie?
Mechie, yep. John Mechie is.
Yep.
So
So refreshing for once to have Houston's receiver room. Actually, we can somewhat understand what to do with it.
yeah, absolutely. If we go to Kansas City side, they may return their corner Jalen Watson, who's been out for a while, has been on injured reserve. So that would be another boost to their defense. Not that they need it with a week off with the bye last week. Wide receiver Miko Hardman is doubtful, so we'll see kind of similar rotations. Jack, if we look at the last real game Kansas City played in Week 17, now they rested their starters in Week 18, but we had, I'm going to pull up here on screen for the wide receivers. So they had Xavier Worthy ran 36 routes, DeAndre Hopkins ran 23, Juju ran 22, and he has like 1% ownership on all slates across the industry. So that was interesting to me. Hollywood Brown 19 and Justin Watson 12. And I think, let me bounce this idea off of you, Jack. So I think with another couple of weeks of conditioning, a couple of more weeks of practice, I think two things here. I would expect Hollywood Brown to see more reps and snaps in this game, but also there were some rumblings about why DeAndre Hopkins just wasn't getting full-time work throughout the season, and there were some reporters saying that there were some contract incentives if he didn't hit a certain snap threshold. Sorry, not contract incentives, but draft pick compensation. So not as scummy of them to not play him as much if they give a lesser draft pick, and they want to save him as a veteran for the playoffs. So I think to me, I could see Hopkins, Hollywood, and Worthy playing a vast majority of the snaps here, and not as spread out. What do you think?
Yeah, I think Kansas City's like the toughest team on the whole slate for me to play. But I think when you say it that way, that makes sense. And I'm wondering if you kind of look at it like, okay, the field is going on Worthy and Kelsey, right? That's who they're betting on. But you just mentioned a few other guys who are pretty likely to get reasonable more opportunities. Maybe you can kind of approach at least a small field build, like pick one of the chalky guys, and then maybe you pick one of those other guys as a pivot. There, I mean, what do you think about them for MME? It's just tough for me because like I always like to know, there's one or two key guys, but it just seems like anything could happen with. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if DeAndre Hopkins got 15 targets, right? Because they were
Right,
saving him for the playoffs.
right.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's
It's
tough.
tough.
It's super tough when you're building multiple lineups. Again, like you said, and it helps. It hurts even more when you're playing less lineups and you're trying to figure out who to key with them. Like even like your small field idea. Yeah, I guess we just play Worthy, Kelsey, and Mahomes if you went that route. But then again, you're not really locking up all the targets by any means on Kansas City side. And now Houston's 10-point dogs. Are you considering stacking CJ Stroud at all on the 2-gamer or on the 4-gamer even? It seems like a tough spot. Again, we look at classic slates during the regular season. We're not really playing underdog quarterbacks who are double-digit underdogs. I think obviously it opens up more on smaller slates, but it also gives us more leverage in just ignoring those guys with our player pool. What do you think?
I think I would, and it's because we have what I like, which is the target district. We know Nico Collins is the key guy, so if you're building small field, you just play him with Stroud. Even I would even debate like locking him with Stroud in 150, and then you've got underperforming Mechie and the tight end, and that's really the target tree. So I think you absolutely can. I don't even think you have to 4-man stack them. You certainly can with Mixon, or 2 wide receivers and a tight end, maybe even the defense. But yeah, I mean, I think you gotta consider it, with the target tree that we the defined target tree that we have with them.
I think that's fair. And if you look at the 4-gamer on DraftKings, Joe Mixon, speaking of him, is expected to be lower owned. 10-point dog, has the ankle injury. But Joe Mixon dominates opportunity, so I think he's probably a good low-owned play if you're looking to mix in something from this game.
Yeah, and again, like we're gonna get to it, right? The second game screams points shootout, but like could the Lions just win like 38-10 and the running backs score 5 touchdowns?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, right? And in that case, like quarterback from the first game might be optimal. So that's why you never want to throw out quarterbacks. It's the DeVito rule, right? Stroud is much better than Danny DeVito. Don't throw him out.
All right, I think that's fair. I think that's fair. Let's move on to the second game, Washington and Detroit. Pretty minimal injuries here. Kevin Zeitler, starting guard for Detroit, is out. That's the one major injury for them, even coming off the bye. David Montgomery returns. I think this was the target return date all along. He hit it. And Jack, for some reason, FanDuel was the only people on the planet that didn't know he was coming back. He's the minimum price on FanDuel for the 2-gamer. He is also the minimum price on their showdown slate. I guess we shouldn't have come to expect any less, but I mean, come on, dude.
Uh, yeah, I mean, we'll get into it when we talk about the short slate strategies, Brian, but like I think that really does change it. Like
Yeah.
I think you can't necessarily blindly adhere to the lineup construction in particular that we always talk about because he's just a minimum price guy with a large floor and a large ceiling. It's just, gotta laugh. What can you say?
I know. So we had a similar situation actually not too long ago in one of these videos where J.K. Dobbins came back. Clearly, it's an oversight for FanDuel when players are coming back from injury. But J.K. Dobbins was min price, and he actually came in lower owned than we thought, Jack. And I don't know if that'll be the case with David Montgomery, but in a case where he should like really be like 95 or 100% owned, he won't be. So there is certainly leverage and just 100% locking him in. I mean, we would lock someone like this on a 12-game slate. We're certainly going to do it on a 2-game slate. I understand the game theory angle and whatnot, but he doesn't have to be perfect or even close to perfect to pay it off. And if not everyone's going to play it, that's an edge.
Yeah, and I think a couple of things, quoting from some of the plugs on main slates when you got guys like this, it's not necessarily about what they do, it's about what you can do with the rest of your lineup. And to your point about him not going 100% when he should, we think optimizers are going to put him and Gibbs in lineups together a lot, but there's going to be some people that just don't want to do that because they're just allergic. I mean, they don't even like playing double running back on Showdown, let alone a two gamer. So yeah, I think there's some opportunity to just lock him in, and then we'll get into it. There's some ways you can play him and still try to get unique, even in large field.
Yeah, correlation rules go out the window when you have such a mispricing. When a guy is
Yep.
min-priced, it doesn't matter if you're playing double running back from the same team, let alone is from Detroit, one of the best double running back teams of all time. But when he's this priced, you really throw all the rules out of the window. On the opposite
I mean,
side,
to be clear with folks, like we would be advocating double running back Detroit even if Montgomery was fairly priced, just
yeah,
because
true.
of the upside. At least I would. So
Yeah, if he was
sorry,
like
but
7K, we would still be playing both of them together.
yeah, absolutely.
So I do want to talk about the other side of this game, the wide receiver group. And if we look at the routes last week for Washington, obviously De'Ami Brown, as we talked about at the top of the show, helped one of our viewers win 100K. Last week it was Terry McLaurin, 36 routes. Alameda Zaccheaus, 27. De'Ami Brown, 26. Luke McCaffrey, 12. Chris Moore, shout out Chris Moore, 7. And Jamison Crowder, 7. Jack, everyone's going to go back to De'Ami Brown, but they did lower the price of Alameda Zaccheaus, especially on the showdown slate, so it's not like he'll go overlooked. And because they're 10-point dogs here, it's not like anyone really will even be that popular despite what they did last week. So, yes, there is some recency bias, but because they're such large underdogs, even in it being a high total game, they won't be that popular.
Yeah, and that's especially true on FanDuel. The other byproduct of Montgomery's mispricing is like a lot of these like 5K guys are just going to be way lower owned because the field's not going to need to play them to stay under the salary cap. You see it with Mechie ownership, and I think you see it with these guys where like maybe if Montgomery was fairly priced, these guys might be Zaccheaus Brown might be 30%. They're like 15 on a two gamer.
That's a really good point, and I think that's another. When you look at the slate in its entirety, that's you see the trickle down effects from such a mispricing. So it is something we can take advantage of on our FanDuel lineups. All right, let's move on to the Sunday games, injury news and notes. Let's look at the Rams and the Eagles here. And this is funny to me because I made such a large bit about Tyler Higbee being quote unquote mispriced and being so overowned, and he comes out and gets like 7 targets in the first 3 minutes and then gets hurt and hits value and leaves the game. But I guess he's good to go. I don't know. He was coughing up blood, but he's not even on the injury report this week, so God knows what happened. But Tyler Higbee for the Rams at tight end is healthy. He'll be good to go. Perhaps an under-the-radar injury here, Jack, is on the Eagles' defensive side. Nakobe Dean, one of their top linebackers, hurt his knee last week. He's on injured reserve, so they'll be missing an integral piece of the middle of their defense. So, but really not much else in this game. What do you make of this game? Rams going on the road. The game should be snowy. We'll talk about weather here in a second, but it doesn't seem as enticing as really any of the other games on the slate, or maybe I'm wrong.
No, this game seems frustrating to me because like you see the names, the talented player names, and you see the ownership on them, and you're like, oh man, like this looks like great good leverage. But then yeah, it's like it's elite defenses, it's bad weather. I mean, this is the total is almost the lowest in the whole of on the whole weekend, right? And it's going down. Yeah, I mean it's tough, man. I don't. I mean, do you? Let's throw it to you. Like I don't know if you're going to play the four game or small field. Like if you are you even going to go to this game?
I don't think I will, right? Obviously, we have Hurts rushing upside. I'd rather not play Stafford on the road, a dome team in this weather. I mean, I really don't like playing wild card winning underdogs in the second round anyways. Typically they underperform. So I don't know. And Eagles, you never know. Again, if you're playing small field, is it going to be AJ Brown? Is it going to be Devonta Smith? Is it going to be Barkley, Hogg? It's really tough to pinpoint. MME, sure. Small field is really tough to wrap my head around this game.
Yeah, I'm with you. And I don't. Yeah, I mean, even last week, right? The Packers had like a billion injuries, and the Eagles still were only like up by 6 points
Right.
with 14. They just go through these bouts of not. I don't know. It's just elite defenses. It's probably a slow paced game, so tough one. And I think fortunately, because the weather is bad and the total is bad, we have some data that we're not just like using emotion to pick that it's a bad game. We actually have some data to say like, yeah, this is not the best game to go for.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's move on to the finale of the weekend, the game everyone will be looking forward to: Baltimore and Buffalo. Another weather game, which we will talk about in a second. Zay Flowers likely remains out for Baltimore. officially listed as doubtful. Head coach John Harbaugh said he has a chance to play, but he hasn't practiced all week. And Ian Rappaport tweeted on Friday that it's pretty unlikely that he's going to play. So I think we can proceed as if Zay Flowers will not suit up for Baltimore, unfortunately. If we look at routes last week, it's pretty gross. Rashad Bateman ran 21. Tylan Wallace ran 15. Nelson Aguilar ran 11. And veteran Anthony Miller ran 5. Devontae Walker, the rookie, ran 1 route. I mean, Jack, we've said it time and time again, right? When Zay is out or Bateman's out, it becomes Mark Andrews, Isaiah Likely as the primary, if not secondary, receiving options on this team. I think even more so in this game environment.
Yeah, and last week also just it sucks to look at because Pittsburgh didn't try to win.
Yeah,
Um,
true.
so I mean, Justice Hill got 4 targets and ran 15 routes as well. So yeah, I think it's the tight ends Bateman, Hill. I'm guessing you are gonna look at this game in the small field. I mean, which side do you prefer here?
I think I prefer the Baltimore side just because we can go double tight end, right? They've been more productive than the tight ends on Buffalo, Dalton Kincaid. Receivers a little more predictable outside of Shakir. But Chris made a good point in our daily play, which, by the way, if you guys have not checked out, it's up on the site. Chris ran through all the 2-game and 4-game notes and rankings and lineup construction tips. Our showdown writer, Bismo, ran through every single showdown slate with rankings and popular values, pivots, leverage ideas. So a written format for the entire weekend. Make sure you go check that out. The link is in the description, and it's also up on our site, occupyfantasy.com. But Chris made a great point that while the quarterbacks, and obviously Derrick Henry is expensive here, and everyone's going to be looking to stack Washington, Detroit, the secondary pieces, the stacking pieces to this game are all pretty cheap, and that alone makes it a pretty intriguing stack target. So I think I can go there in small field because we have the floor and ceiling of the rushing quarterbacks, and then if we get the pieces right around it, then it becomes a spot where we can actually fit one more stud in because of the cheaper receiving options.
Yep, makes sense to me. I think we got what do we got covered? The Buffalo injuries, or did we do that already?
No, we just got Ray Davis is questionable. He's been the running back 2/3. I don't know if he's going to suit up. Truly questionable. We'll see if he passes the concussion protocol. However, it was Ty Johnson, the Ty Johnson show last week, and he was getting run late in the game. So we'll see. I don't know if they're going to give James Cook a full workload. That's the one question. You and I talked about it last week is now these teams are moving into the playoffs, do or die. Do they just give their best players the most work? Buffalo didn't do that, but they were also in control of that game. Do you think they continue to split with Ty Johnson, or do you think that, okay, let's give James Cook the ball more and more? Because even no matter how important the game is, it doesn't really seem like they've been willing to do that.
Yeah, and I think it also factor in here is just the price and ownership. I mean, I don't know what the 4-gamer is, but on the 2-gamer, we think James Cook is gonna be 70% owned, and he's not that cheap. I mean, 7K. It's a weird slate with FanDuel because there's two 9.5K running backs and then two 7K running backs. So I think just by the virtue that Cook is 2K cheaper than Henry and Barkley, you can't fit both. People are gonna play Cook as the home team there. So yeah, I think it's worth. Based on that ownership, at least I would say I'd probably be under on that because that's more, I'm not willing to go all in on him getting 100% of the touches based on the usage. I don't know. I'm just looking at their routes from last week. Mac Hollins is still out there running wind sprints. He did get 2 targets and they were pretty deep. Yeah, they were both 20-yard targets. I don't know. Do you mess around with him or Samuel or Cooper, or do you think it's just the main guys for Buffalo?
Dude, it's so bad. That's the one problem, right? Buffalo, you can stack in small field, right? You stack Shakir. We know his targets are pretty guaranteed. But then after that, it's a crapshoot between Amari Cooper, Keon Coleman, Mac Hollins, Curtis Samuel. I don't know. Dalton Kincaid hasn't been impressive. So that's the other reason I prefer stacking the Baltimore side in this game. More predictable targets for smaller contests. But I think we saw it last week, right? With Samuel catching the long touchdown. These are the types of guys that if you play the 2-gamer especially, you have to mix into your large mass multi-entry player pool. We're gonna lie if we're gonna sit here and tell you which ones we know are the best plays. I think you just have to mix them all in because they're getting targets.
Yeah, and on the note of Ty Johnson, I mean, he did run 16 routes last game, and he obviously caught a touchdown. So, I mean, you could certainly play him. You could certainly play him and Cook and Allen in the same lineup, I think, just because it seems like Ty Johnson's almost more of a wide receiver or, a short area pass catcher than a running back. I don't know.
Yeah, Yeah, I think that's pretty fair, actually, the way that they have been using him. So that is something interesting to think about. And absolutely no one's going to play all three of those guys in the same lineup. So clip this. Shout out to the person who inevitably wins 100K from doing that in their lineup. All right, let's move on. Let's talk about the weather now, because this is interesting. And again, it's not like the weather in these games is going to be incredibly impactful. But when you compare it to the one game on the slate that's in a dome, the conditions add up a little bit. Jack, if we look at Houston and Kansas City, temperatures in the 20s, wind 10 to 20 miles per hour. We know fantasy scoring generally drops once temperatures drop, but it's got to be like 0 degrees when we really start to factor it in. But, temps in the 20s, some wind, not that great for Houston, Kansas City. We look at the Rams and Philly, 1 to 3 inches of snow. Not going to be super cold though, right around freezing. Not that much wind. So will the snow be that impactful? Probably not. And then you look at Baltimore and Buffalo, temperatures in the teens, a slight chance of snow, a little wind. So it's not like we get any crazy weather games. I'm just, I'm always itching for showdown slates to play a weather game angle, lower scoring defenses, leave salary on the table. I don't want to force it, but I think especially in the Baltimore Buffalo game, it could be useful in showdown because people will be building it as if it's a normal game. So, what are your thoughts just in general on Washington, Detroit being in a dome compared to these other weather games?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's that makes it easy when you're looking to focus. Like, I mean, if I was building one lineup for the whole weekend, I would just go with the dome game with the high total, right? Just don't overthink it, I guess. But yeah, it does make it tough when you're building a lot of lineups to figure out like how to allocate. Like I mentioned, it's really tempting to play CJ Stroud because of the ownership and the pass catchers. But yeah, it's like kind of bad weather. He's a big underdog. It's tough, man. I don't know. I'm glad I'm not really focusing on the four gamer because I don't know. I don't know if it's a lot harder to make those decisions. I think when you got to weigh them all together.
It is. It is extremely difficult. So let's transition and let's now talk about the DraftKings four gamer, and afterwards we will talk about the FanDuel two gamers for each of the days. All right. So the core strategies, four short slates that we have been so profitable with over the past few years: leaving salary on the table, playing low owned players, mega stacking, playing multiple guys from the same game, and late swapping. Now on the four gamer, Jack, we're not looking to leave much salary. I put it in our show notes to tell people that I do think it's important though. Again, I wouldn't have this as a priority, but if you're choosing between a couple of players before the first game locks, I would always lean towards the side of leaving a couple of $100 on the table just to give yourself more late swap flexibility.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what your standard would be, but like starting with 500 range just to give yourself a little flexibility for the builder to jam guys in, or just like you said, late swapping. Like you don't need to use every single dollar on any slate, let alone like a four gamer.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
yeah, I'm with you. You don't need to be leaving like 2K on a four gamer for sure, especially not this one.
No, definitely not. All right, let's talk about the low owned plays because I think this is probably the best angle for the four gamer this weekend. A wide variety of really good low owned plays, and low owned we consider under 20% projected ownership for DraftKings. The quarterbacks, everyone but Jaden Daniels and Jared Goff are going to be low owned on DraftKings. At running back, Joe Mixon, James Cook, the Washington and Kansas City running backs, in addition to all of the backup running backs on the slate. At wide receiver, we have Jameson Williams, Devonta Smith, Hollywood Brown, A.J. Brown, De'Ami Brown, all the Browns, Olamide Zaccheaus, Keon Coleman, DeAndre Hopkins, Cooper Kupp, Amari Cooper. At tight end, Isaiah Likely, Dalton Kincaid, Dallas Goedert, Zach Ertz, Tyler Higbee. So, like, this has to be the angle, right? Depending whatever game you stack or don't stack, playing multiple of these guys feels like easily the best path to differentiation on the four gamer.
Yeah, and I think hand in hand with that is the mega stacking. And like, do you think because we have so many good low owned plays here, maybe for the four gamer you don't have to be forcing the mega stacking as much as you would maybe on a two gamer?
Yeah, I don't think you do have to, right? Like I think especially with four games now, this is the first four game we've talked about. We've talked about three gamers and two gamers before on these videos. But in four gamers, the stacking becomes less optimal. Still, three ones, three O's, three twos. I think Washington, Detroit is obviously the best target. But Jack, if we get a blowout, I think we can lean more into Kansas City 3-0 stacks, 4-0 stacks, especially Detroit 3-0 and 4-0 stacks, purely because of the spreads in this game. I think there might be in some of these games, because it's a four gamer, an over representation of a bring back in game stacks. And if we get blowouts in those games, and again, we have so many other good plays that I think it's very conceivable that not a single Commander or not a single Texan ends up in a winning lineup if those games blow out.
Yep, makes sense to me. And I mean, do you think it's just fair to say like, kind of that general thumb rule of like one guy under 20% or so is like a good starting point for folks in a larger field contest or even like a, I don't know, 200-person GPP?
I would honestly say two because they're so good, and if you play the popular quarterbacks, which I think is probably the right move, right? Especially in smaller contests, you play Jaden Daniels, play Jared Goff, whatever. I think you can easily. It's not like you're forcing in really bad low owned plays. I would start with two of these guys, no matter the contest you're playing in, and then I think you could play even up to four, maybe five in the four gamer.
Yeah, I mean, they're not bad players, like you
Right.
said. So it should be easy to do. Yep.
Let's talk about before we
Um,
really quickly before we go to the FanDuel. I want to talk about the late swap window because this is how you won $50,000 the first time. Is we had the first set of games on Saturday come in. You and I had a large discussion on Sunday morning. You actually made a swap, and that swap led to you winning $50,000. So maybe reminisce a little bit on that scenario, and then how people can take the extra time that we have that we normally don't have on a short slate. The Saturday night game ends. We have all Sunday morning until 3 p.m. Eastern on Sunday afternoon before the third game starts. What was that like for you back then? And then how can people use that to their advantage this time around?
it was like really fun because I had never won before, so I was super excited, and I was not jaded by all the times that I've had a really good lineup and not won. But yeah, I mean, it's cool that you have like the whole night and the next day to think about it. So yeah, I mean, you can really take your time and just kind of do what we said, but you look at the PMR that you have and the other people have and the positions, right? If they have the same positions as you above you, and then like you kind of start with if you have the best lineup with that PMR remaining, you can just swap to like the most optimal. When we say optimal, like the highest projected, highest owned plays to try to win. And then if there's people above you with a better lineup, then you have to start if you want to win at least you have to start looking at like making suboptimal plays like leaving salary, using lower on guys that aren't projected as well, but would give you a chance to get up there.
Yeah, exactly. And I think
And
if I remember correctly from yours, I think you were blocked and you swapped to the Mitch Trubisky Allen Robinson stack, which was a little bit lower projected than one of the other stacks on that day. That ended up winning you the money. And I think when you have such a longer time period compared to 30 minutes, if you're not running simulations or running intense programming to figure out who's ahead and who's not, having 6, 7, 8 hours, if you have that type of time, at least a half an hour or an hour, you can go through each individual lineup more carefully and say, oh, I know I'm behind, or oh, I know I'm ahead. And you have a much better understanding of where you sit when you have a longer time period to digest it.
yeah, I think I had like Lamar Jackson lineup in
Oh,
there,
yeah.
and then I swapped to Chargers defense and stacked the late game, and then Chargers crushed them, and then the late game went off. So yep, that's what we did. It was great.
Let's try to run it back this weekend. All right. Anything else on the four gamer, Jack? Any ideas before we talk about the FanDuel two gamers?
We didn't talk. We don't have to spend a lot of time on this. I just know like the Kansas City running backs are like 5% owned on the four gamer. I mean, do you have any interest in anything there, or is that just some stay away? We have split carries. I just it's just very low for like a big home favorite in a bad weather game.
You put it that way. It seems now it's incredibly intriguing because at first thought I was like, I don't know, because they went back and forth 30 snaps, 20 snaps, 20 snaps, 30 snaps. You don't know who's getting goal line work. They're splitting. I think you got to take some shots, though, as 10-point favorites, right? This is a really good spot for the running backs here. But their running backs have underperformed all year, like as a group. Like you look at expected fantasy points, every single one is underperformed. That has to be a function of the offense. But it's a really good spot at 5%. I think you have to take a shot. Will I play them in smaller contests? I don't know. But I think there's also a nice thing of knowing, Jack, if your low owned play doesn't exceed expectations in the very first game of the slate, you can switch the rest of your lineup pretty quickly. Having more information quickly is better for lower owned plays. So I do like it from that angle as well.
Yeah, I just think you got to consider it. It is gross. I mean, even on DraftKings, like David Montgomery's the same price as those guys, so that's
True.
why they're so low, right? Because he's just a way better play. But yeah, all right, we can transition now.
Okay, let's talk about FanDuel now. We'll start with Saturday only. Again, if you guys have questions about specific slates, specific players, drop it in the chat. Well, I guess there's no live chat, but drop it in the comments after this video is posted. We'll happily answer them. Remember, Discord is the best way to ask us questions, chat with other members of our community, and sweat out the games with us. OccupyFantasy.com/Discord for our members of our website. Link is in the description. All right, two gamer. And I think we have to talk about leaving salary, especially for the Saturday. I'm going to kind of combine both slates here in terms of strategy goes. We've already talked about the players and the stacks for each slate, but we have to discuss the David Montgomery $4,000. Jack, he could be, I don't think he will be, but he could be the highest scoring player on the slate, right? So I think you could leave basically any amount of salary with him as long as you're not leaving another lower price player that you could upgrade to like Gibbs or Mixon or Collins or something.
Yeah, I was just looking at this before the slate. I mean, he could outscore anyone, like you said, even Gibbs. And then the tight ends can all outscore each other. I think especially if you're playing the late quarterbacks, Goff and Daniels, certainly they can outscore everyone. And then what you're left with, I think, where you got to be careful, maybe what you're getting as like the wide receivers, like you probably still don't want to have like Tim Patrick in your lineup and be able to upgrade to like St. Brown or something,
Yeah.
right? Like you got to be careful with those. But I think as long as you have like good wide receivers in those spots, Montgomery could you could leave a lot like I don't know 4K, right? I mean I think you might not even have to go that low, but the point is you could find 150 lineups well under like even 1,500 remaining probably, and I think that's a great way to get different on the slate. Just because it's tough to get away from the good chalk in that late game
And not to
as
mention,
far as ownership.
right, and if both games blow out, which the spreads indicate is a possibility, leaves even more chaos for leaving salary on the table as it is for Showdown. So what I would suggest people do is they go into our lineup builder, they set the min salary to like 55K, 54K, hell, 50K. It doesn't really matter when I'm about to explain the next part. You set the min salary, Jack, and then for all the cheaper garbage players or not as prominent players, you set their specific custom salary ranges to 59, 59.5, right? That way, when those guys are in the lineup, you're not leaving a lot of salary. But when you have all the studs or all the regular players in your lineup, you can leave 10K, and it would make sense.
Yep, that's exactly what I do, and then you can just check right to make sure you didn't screw it up. You can look at the lineups that have a lot of salary left, and just look at them and do those like see what you can swap to and see if it makes sense to you.
Yep, exactly. So really big edge potentially, despite the mispricing on FanDuel. And it's not fading Montgomery; it's just playing lower salary lineups with Montgomery. Easily the number one strategy for that slate. Now on the Sunday slate. Leaving salary probably not as much of an option when you have Derrick Henry and Barkley and Kyron and James Cook and all these other guys. But I guess the theory is here with Henry and Barkley being so high priced, you could leave like 1,000 or 1,500 because you could still use Kyron or James Cook and still not have enough salary to get up to Barkley or Henry, I guess.
Yep, that's certainly that would those guys could outscore each other, so that's one way. I'm just looking at the quarterback pricing is you have Stafford is like 2K under Allen too. This is a tougher one. I don't know. Let's look at maybe this is more of a low on play mega stacking one here. I'm just looking. We have all the Buffalo secondary pieces, like you said, sub 20. What do we have likely at?
Likely is above 20 on FanDuel for this slate.
Yeah, the price is still too low.
Yep.
So yeah, I think you can leave some salary and maybe mix in some loan plays. This is a tougher one though, I think.
This is a much tougher one. And I guess the next question is for this slate, and let's just talk about stacking for both slates now, really quickly. Um, you and I, right before we went live, were talking about just going all in on the Detroit game, and it seems so good, especially when you have the salary options on the Saturday slate. On the Sunday slate, yes, we want to just go all in on Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen, but on a two-gamer, I think we have to consider Stafford and Hurts with the price savings, just with the potential weather in both games. Like things could get weird. So I think you have to consider all four quarterbacks more heavily on the Sunday slate than you would on the Saturday slate.
Yeah, I agree. And I was just also looking. I mean, Ty Johnson, Justice Hill, FanDuel two gamer are still pretty low owned. We obviously talked about them being solid plays with the opportunities they're getting. And you can even it's a little gross, but you can consider things like throwing a defense in against a quarterback, right? Like that's another way. Like if you're kind of stuck and you could use all the salary and do that, that's a way to get unique. So tougher slate, but yeah, consider all the quarterbacks and try to mix in one of those low end guys. Leave a little salaries
Because
fine.
you look at the low owned plays on Sunday slate, it's Stafford. Okay, fine. But again, excuse me. But again, when you have a low owned quarterback, that's still like 10%. That's still 10% of entire large field. That's gonna have similar looking lineups. So it's not really a low owned play. We have all the backup running backs. And I think, like you said, Justice Hill, Ty Johnson, the best of the group by far. You look at the receivers, it's Cooper Kupp, who can't get more than 50 yards receiving in a game to save his life. It's Nelson Aguilar, it's Tylan Wallace, it's Demarcus Robinson, it's Amari Cooper, it's Matt Collins, Curtis Samuel, all guys who could not draw targets. So not great from that perspective. The tight ends are probably the best bet in Dallas Goedert and Tyler Higbee, but easily the worst of the two slates when it comes to low-owned plays. So you have to look at other ways to get different.
Yeah, honestly, after talking this one through, I might just stick to small field tomorrow with this one. It's just real tough. It's real tough to I don't know. I'll try to build some lineups. Maybe we'll talk about it in the Discord, but it seems really tough to build really unique, awesome lineups for large field on this slate with the pricing and the ownership.
Yeah, I mean, you compare it to the Saturday slate on who's low-owned. It's the Washington running backs as in the trailing game script. It's both Kansas City running backs, as we talked about earlier. It's Hollywood Brown, De'Ami Brown, Olamide Zaccheaus, John Mechie, DeAndre Hopkins, all we can make cases for to draw targets, and then Zach Ertz at tight end. I mean, you compare that to Sunday, it's not even a competition of which slate has the better low-owned plays.
Yep, yep. It's a tough one.
All right. Chris pointed this out in the Daily Plug. What are your thoughts on this, right? This is, I think it goes for both a 4-gamer on DraftKings and a 2-gamer on FanDuel. Could Jalen Daniels outscore Jared Goff and a Detroit mega stack looks better? So you played like Jaden Daniels with like 4 Detroit guys, right? It looks weird, but I think it's another way to get different because of his rushing ability and Goff not running as much.
Yeah, I think we've seen that stuff win before, and it could happen. I mean, again, I think again with this whole min price Montgomery thing, a lot of these rules go out the window. That lineup seems like it could win anyway. So yeah, I think you could just make an argument to just loosening up the construction and just jamming the hell out of the late game and getting every possible like type of construction that's possible, as long as you just are trying to be unique by maybe leaving a little salary or using low end guys.
Yeah,
So, yeah, sure.
that really might be the way to go. All right, any final thoughts on the classic slates before we close it out with just a couple showdown notes?
Nope. Let's go get a screenshot, man.
All right, let's do it. So again, each individual showdown contest is up on both sites. Uh, and again, not gonna go too deep because you can kind of extrapolate all the stuff we've talked about into the showdown contest. Just a couple points. Houston, Kansas City. Mechie is extremely mispriced as an underperforming wide receiver. He's super cheap on DraftKings, so it'll be incredibly popular there. Jack, I noticed on DraftKings the field is actually building balanced and or Houston heavy, which cannot possibly be right as 10-point underdogs.
Yeah, and I think we've seen this a lot. We just build like overstacking the favorite in those situations is a great play in small field, large field, everything. So and you can play chalkier guys, especially small field, if you are doing that because people just don't have them all in the same lineup.
Exactly. Washington and Detroit, again, despite being 10-point underdogs, the most popular values are De'Ami Brown because he's came off a huge game last week and is only $4,000. And Olamide Zaccheaus, the number 2 receiver, is $4,400 on DraftKings, so they'll be popular. Now, the field is building Detroit heavy, as they probably should, but the values are on Washington's side. So this is a little bit tougher because the values are correct here. But again, on FanDuel in this game, Montgomery's been priced, another lock button situation. And maybe one of our favorite scenarios, Jack, in Showdown when we have a min price real player, 75% regular ownership, 4% MVP.
You took the words out of my mouth. Yeah, I mean Montgomery MVP is a awesome large, probably a large field only play, but like awesome large field play. I mean, again, he could easily outscore everyone on the slate if he gets his normal role. People just won't do it. We should do this sometime, but I feel like even when we see guys that are lower projected by the big sites, if they're more expensive, a lot of times they're still higher owned at MVP. It's just like people have to use like the expensive guy, so they're just allergic to playing a 5K guy at MVP. We saw who's the guy, Boston Scott, I think, was the infamous one.
Yeah, infamous
that was
one.
like 75% flex, like 3% MVP, and he won.
Yep.
So yeah, I think that's a no-brainer way to play it.
Absolutely what dreams are made of. All right, Sunday's showdown slates, Rams and Philly. I would say the toughest showdown slate of the group. This is pretty reminiscent of the Rams Monday night wildcard game where the value was just non-existent and people were playing gross plays. That's how Tyler Higbee gets 30, 40, 50% owned. He's a little more expensive now, and people are going to look to play like literally the worst plays possible to jam an extra stud. We know that possibly cannot be right. I would say, Jack, on these types of slates is You play a mid-range captain on DraftKings, or you play a defense to play for a lower scoring game, especially in the weather conditions, or just play more balanced because jamming in guys like Johnny Wilson and Ronnie Rivers and Davis Allen just long term are not the right ways to play.
Yeah, I mean, guy like you keep mentioning him, Cooper Cup. Like you think eventually maybe he'll get over 50 yards. I mean, this would be a great time for it. I bet you he's gonna be. I'm guessing he's gonna be pretty low owned, right? He's just in that like no man's land
Yep.
of mid range.
Yeah, I mean,
And yeah, kickers and defenses too make a lot of sense here, especially defenses in the weather environment.
I mean, no one is clicking Cooper Cup's name when he scored less than 20 points in the last 4 games combined. So it's not going to happen. There was just really quickly a quote from Sean McVay this week saying, we're trying to give him the ball, just like things aren't happening right. I mean, maybe this is being nice and Cooper Cup is washed. I don't know, but he's saying like we are trying to get him the ball. So maybe this is the case that it actually happens. Finally, Baltimore and Buffalo. Tylan Wallace will be the popular value on DraftKings. Not nearly as bad as the Rams game in terms of jamming a bad value, but Wallace isn't like some target hog, Jack. Again, he's scored less than 5 fantasy points basically every single game of the year. So I think another game where you could try to build more balanced or play a defense or more kickers and not play the really bad value to get in the extra stud.
Yeah, of course, right? Because we're saying that he's gonna like score a touchdown for his first career touchdown, first and last career touchdown. Yeah, and I think on the FanDuel side, I don't know, we haven't done the ownership yet for this one, but because Allen and Lamar are typically the monster ownership MVPs, this is probably, look, we've talked about this, like the lowest they'll get as MVP. So if you feel like really good about one, it's a good chance to just play 100% on one and actually get real leverage, where typically when they're on a showdown slate, they're like 50, 60% MVP. And then, Derrick Henry is in there. James Cook is probably an interesting one if it's like a slower paced game. But as we usually say, these are tough showdown slates when you have like the really high ceiling, high floor rushing quarterbacks that are super owned. I think probably prefer the Saturday showdowns over Sunday.
We prefer the Saturday showdowns, and we prefer the Saturday Classic on FanDuel. So get all your allocation in today, folks. That's the key takeaway from this video. All right, Jack. Final thoughts here, man. I think we got some good games on tap here. I think we covered pretty much everything. But any final advice for people out there?
No, I think just remember to late swap. As always, the final advice.
Yes, and if you have specific late swap questions, we'll be around in the Discord server. Remember, OccupyFantasy.com is where you can get the daily plug with the full rundown for every single slate. Our Occupy model is up and running with rankings for every slate, as well as projected ownership for every slate, integral in making decisions for these shorter slates and these showdown slates. Our lineup builder, all the rules that we talked about, you can go build your lineups there. It's how we build our lineups. OccupyFantasy.com/lineup builder is how you can learn how to get access to that. And again, our Discord will be around all weekend in Discord. So for Jack, I'm Brian. Thanks everyone for listening. Final reminder, by the way, just a couple more of these videos, and make sure you're subscribed to the channel here on YouTube. It's the best free way to support the channel. Helps us do more videos. Just click subscribe below the video. You'll get notified when we post the conference championship video and any Super Bowl videos that we do. And give us a thumbs up. Another like less than a second way that's free to help the channel. So subscribe, thumbs up, and drop a comment if you have any questions. So for Jack, I'm Brian. Good luck and enjoy the divisional round of the playoffs.